Hey guys, how are you? Are these your banana stuff? Yeah? Do you want me to give them to people? Did you want me to eat all three of them? I think if you want to share them with people, that's probably best. Really? Okay, should we get started? Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So last week, 2 days ago, we got into a discussion. We started the 4th verse of Surah Al-Mu'minoon, where Allah says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ, the ones who are the doers of zakah. And just to offer a quick recap, we talked about zakah principally in terms of charity, the kind of chronology of how zakah as a pillar of practice gets institutionalized. In the latter part of the Medinese experience, we have in the 9th year after Hijrah, the 8 categories of zakah that get revealed. Prior to this, we have a mandate of zakah, and prior to that, zakat al-fitr that comes into play in the 2nd year after Hijrah in Medina. In the Meccan period, we looked at some of the verses that introduce the construct that quite often is associated with the giving of zakah, right? Paired a lot with salah, waqimu salah wa atu zakah. The idea being that worship of the divine can't be separated from social welfare. These are two things that go hand in hand. Right? May Allah make us from amongst those who serve Him well by serving His creation. And then we start to talk about it from the standpoint of tazkiyah, right? That Surah Al-Mu'minoon being a Meccan surah, where the implementation of zakah in its final form happens much later, and thinking about those who are committed to the practice of tazkiyah that is denoted from the term fa'ilun, and how there's a regularity in the practice. We wanted to pick up from some of where we had left off and focus a lot today on tazkiyah and where and how that plays a role, yarhamakullah, in the initial premise, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, indeed the believers have succeeded, they have falah, may Allah make us from amongst them, meaning that they have Jannah, right? That's the aspiration, the objective here. I wanted to start us off with a conversation around 4 variables that you can identify as arenas of kind of consciousness and cognition within our tradition. Because the heart in and of itself that we talked about last time becomes one of the things that we are thinking about in a prism of purification, cleanliness, or the cleaning thereof. But we said last week that everything pretty much has the ability to be purified, right? When you think about zakah in principle and the idea that it's a purification, we don't want to think about statements in the absence of substance. We want to think about them in terms of practical implementation. What does it mean that wealth can be purified? Time can be purified, intention can be purified, relationships can be purified. What does it mean that pretty much anything has this variable of having some element of being soiled, and so too there's then mechanisms to cleanse it? And we'll get back to the connection point between verse 3 and verse 4, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ, that we spent a lot of time on. But the heart in its nature, I want you to think about in terms of the need for it to be nourished. And ghafla, heedlessness, distraction, is something that takes away from the nourishing of the heart. I don't want you to think about this at the level of a soundbite or something that is entertaining, but think about it as an inherent quality. You know, if I eat a banana and the potassium helps me with cramps in my calf muscles, right? Why does it do that? Because that's what potassium does. So when I played football in high school, we ate a lot of bananas. Why do we eat a lot of bananas? So that when you are practicing 3 times a day in the summer, or you're playing in the heat, you don't want to cramp up in the middle of a game. So it helps. The consequence of this nourishment is that it yields then that output. Does that make sense? So ghafla, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ, one of the connecting points in the phrases that we're engaging in right now is that it's not going to nourish the heart, it's going to take away from the nourishment of the heart, as well as take away from the things that actively nourish the heart. Does that make sense? And I want you to think about that in the frame of some of the things that we're going to discuss today, as well as where we ended last time, where we talked about core beliefs and how positive and negative core beliefs are things that we each get socialized with. Traumatic experience, major life experience can yield the impact of the development of in our lives, and the heart being a vessel, the inherent natures and qualities to it, we don't want to think about in an intangible way, but the beauty of a religion that teaches us that the heart in and of itself is something that exists within us physically as well as spiritually. And these are actual qualities of the heart, not things that are just meant to be memorized, but reflected upon. If instead of eating bananas, I drank gallons of soda in the course of a season playing sports, then I would pass out in the middle of a game, right? I would vomit in the middle of a game. What I'm consuming is going to bear impact. Does that make sense? We'll revisit the core beliefs conversation also and try to wrap up with this verse today, inshallah, before we get to Maghrib time. So I want you to think about how within us, if we create kind of a mainframing of how we function, the tazkiya of the self, right? Tazkiyat the nafs is something that requires us to understand the self on a whole and what makes us who it is that we are. And you have a physical body, what we call the jasad, the badan, right? This is your physical being. This is my physical being, not your physical being. You are physically you. I am physically me. Does that make sense? You have the lower self, the nafs, the ego. You have within you the qalb, the spiritual heart. You have an intellectual capacity as a function of that heart, what's called the aql. You have the ruh, the spirit, the soul. You have irada, sheer will and determination. You have also within you every memory that you hold on to, all of the emotions, all of the feelings. There's a lot that makes you you on a whole. Consumer driven society wants you to just see yourself as the most reductive, simplistic understanding of yourself. It wants you to see yourself with immediacy and not see how all of you is connected to the rest of you. We want to circumvent a lot of the unconscious driven mode of self to know the building blocks of what makes us who we are, and then think out, well, how do we nourish those different parts? And we'll get into some of those things today, but the first prism that I want us to think about are arenas of consciousness that exist within us, and the mode through which tazkiya as a principle is enabling us to learn about what these different forces and elements are, how in fact they interact, and which one is actually leading my life. It's a subjective conversation that you want to make yourself mentally and emotionally available to, that doesn't deem it to need a consistency across the board. But if the gross majority of my life is spent with my stomach making my decisions, or my negative core beliefs making my decisions, if my sexual organs make my decisions, if wealth and dunya make my decisions for me, and a negative core belief structure that has me find a sense of self rooted in the submission of the dunya, these are kind of things that I have to be able to acknowledge in order to overcome them. If there's other parts, my heart, my inherent primordial nature, parts to me that I've cultivated and nourished, those things can make decisions for me too. So, bucket number one, in terms of arenas of consciousness that have a role in determining how it is that we engage, the first is the fitra. This is your primordial state of existence. What I'd like for us to do, just because more people have trickled in, turn to the persons next to you. What do you know about the fitra? What do you know in terms of its characteristics, things that you have learned and heard about it, how it is that you relate to it? Let's just turn to the persons next to us so that we can get talking a bit, exchange some names. What do you know about this thing? And then we'll kind of come back and talk it out a bit and move forward in the conversation. We're going to talk about 4 different elements in this arena of consciousness. And the first one we're going to talk about is fitra. But go ahead, let's discuss with the persons next to us. What is this thing of the fitra? And we'll come back and discuss. Isn't that what it is? Okay, what are we talking about? What's the fitra? If we were to define it, identify it, build a relationship to it, what would we say? Somebody walked into this room today, they said, what is this fitra thing? Someone took their shahada and they're explaining to them, what's the fitra? How do you define and identify it? What do we discuss? What do you think? Yeah. I'm gonna pass this back. Thanks.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hamza.
So one of the things that we discuss is like the fitra means is something that you're born with and how you recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, for every person it's like very different. So one of the questions that he asked is like how do you recognize Allah? And then like for me it's like I see him as like the most like merciful. But like one of the things that he added is like every stage of the life you have a very different kind of like a fitra.
Okay. What else? You're gonna say something? Or is that what you're gonna say?
Yeah, I like one of the discussions that we had, how as you evolve through your life, your perception of your fitna changes. So if we're going to relate it in the sense of how we internalize God, maybe when I was younger, it was more related to fear, not making a mistake. But now it's more about mercy, love, and acceptance. So as you evolve throughout your life, your perception and your thinking can change.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead. Can you pass it this way?
Hey, Assalamualaikum. Isn't fitra the inherent state human beings were born in terms of like we actually were created to do good and kind of like that's our internal state. Actually, that's how we were created. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead. It's important because this is a big part of what makes us who we are, right? We want to know what it is so that we know that we're actually engaging it in that way. Go ahead.
To add on to this last point, we discussed that the clarification to that is that all humans are born in submission to God. And that's ultimately why we believe everyone is born Muslim. And you may make choices after that, but like how you're initially created, how you're born, is in that state of submission. And that is also what makes us uniquely human amongst Allah's creations, because we have a choice after our conception to incline towards that fitra or against it.
Yeah. So let's talk about this because we want to have definitions with things that aren't coming from just inclinations, you know? Like certain things are going to have subjective definition to it. Certain things will have subjective experience, certain things won't. It's a banana, right? Can I say it's an orange? I can say it's an orange, but it's not. It's a banana. Do you know what I mean? If I walked in here and I said to you, like, hand me the orange, and you said, what orange? And I said, the yellow thing on the table, you'd say, it's not an orange. And if somebody taught it to me, or I just didn't know and I made that claim, you would say, you don't know what that thing is. And then how can I obtain something or build a relationship with something that I don't have an actual interaction with? You see what I mean? How I can relate to my fitri state is something that can change over time. That's exactly why we want to understand it as an arena of consciousness. But the fitra in and of itself refers to an innate original disposition that Allah instills within each human being. I want you to look at this verse. I'm going to put it in the WhatsApp group. Where is the WhatsApp group? Here it is. This is from Surah Al-Rum. Can somebody read this? If you're not in the WhatsApp group, we're looking at Surah Al-Rum. It's the 30th chapter of the Quran. It's 30th verse. Somebody want to read it, the English, the Arabic? You can read either or. Did you want to read? Is that what you were saying? No. Yeah. Do you have the mic? I don't know where the mic is. Go ahead.
You will never achieve righteousness until you donate some of what you cherish, and whatever you give is certainly well known to Allah.
We're looking at 30:30. Did I put the wrong thing?
So be steadfast in faith in all uprightness, O Prophet, the natural way of Allah which He has instilled in all people. Let there be no change in this creation of Allah. That is the straight way, but most people do not know.
Can somebody read the Arabic? You can read it also if you'd like.
فأقم وجهك للدين حنيفا فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها لا تبديل لخلق الله ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون.
Great. So you can see within the context of this verse that it's referencing right off the bat that this innate disposition is something that Allah is establishing and instilling within each human being individually. I just put a hadith in the chat group as well. People want to take a look at that also. So the Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Ma min mawludin illa yuladu ala al-fitra," that there is no child that is born except that they're born upon the fitra, this natural instinct. And as the hadith continues, it talks about how a child's parents then orient them towards other ways of existence. They make them something that becomes distinct from that innate disposition. And within the hadith that we shared, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he actually then recites this verse that we looked at from Surah Al-Rum that is talking about this natural inclination of one's spirit, one's soul, that is going to bring them towards an orientation around things like truth, not a morally relative truth, but the ability to recognize truth. Because think about it, when we have dua, where the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us to make dua, to recognize truth as truth and falsehood as falsehood, it means that one has the ability to then actually misconstrue truth as falsehood and falsehood as truth. What the fitra is telling us is that your primordial state of existence, the initial instillment within you, is something that inclines towards the recognize of truth as truth. But your socialization, the mode in which you are raised, the environment, etc., the same thing we were talking about in terms of core beliefs last week. People will tell you that they love you, or they tell you that you're a mistake. They tell you you're beautiful, or they tell you that you're ugly. The mode in which we have positive or negative core beliefs start to then affirm how we process realities. The fitra in and of itself inclines ones towards a natural disposition and a belief in Allah. If you've ever talked to a young person in your life, one that has the capacity to intelligibly communicate with you, not like a 1-year-old who doesn't have language skills, maybe like a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, innately, one doesn't necessarily automatically assume that prophets of God exist or angels exist. But most kids, if you talk to them, it's not an exaggeration. They can conceptually understand the existence of a divine entity. They're not at odds with the idea that God exists. Innately, they're just built and wired towards the recognition of a belief in the divine. The inclination innately towards goodness, purity, and the recognition of what is deemed to be moral. All of this and more is rooted in the understanding of what the fitra actually is. And you have the innate orientation of the soul towards these things instilled within you by Allah. Meaning that before there was trauma, before there was ego, before there was many things that shifted our perspective on the way that we move forward in our processing of things in the world. You had a fitri state that enables us to understand that our perspective and our disposition was to help us to recognize what is actual beauty in the world, to be able to recognize what it is that is real rahmah and compassion, what is sincerity, what is remembrance, societal conditioning, insecurity, shame, comparison. These are products that are built to divert us from that natural mode of disposition. It takes us away from a fitri engagement of consciousness And we start to get ourselves in a place where we move away from the fitra and what it is that it recognizes. Most people deep down know when something is spiritually harming them. But they just do. Do you know what I mean? Can you tell me honestly that you think lying is a spiritually beneficial act? Who would say that? I think that gossiping is a spiritually nourishing act. No. Most people know. Most people know that arrogance, racism, these types of ignorances, may Allah protect us from them, these are going to be actions that are spiritually harmful. Ghafla, heedlessness, israf, excess. We know that these things, deep down, you just have a disposition. It doesn't make any sense. Can you imagine if I took a bite out of every banana, I opened each one, took a bite just out of the top, I spit all over the rest of it, and then I just threw it away. He said, Khalid, what are you doing? I just like the first bite of the banana. Could you tell me innately that you think that makes sense as an action? You might not say something to me about it because of the nature of the dynamic of our relationships, but you could say from your heart, that guy's an idiot and he is wasteful, right? What part of you is letting yourself understand that? Your fitra, the primordial orientation. It doesn't mean that your fitra changes as life moves on in the sense of what is the natural disposition. What changes is your relationship to your fitra. The trauma, the societal conditioning, the ego, the insecurity, the comparison, it's making us get to a place where we start to ignore the fitra. The more we ignore it, the quieter it becomes. My ignoring of my fitri state is going to be what enables me to believe that I can just take a bite out of each one and throw the rest away and not even feel anything afterwards. I can somehow conclude that that's a proper source of engagement. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah? I want to make sure it makes sense. Let's take a quick pause. Turn to the person who's next to you. What is it making you think about? What is it bringing up for you? Let's think about it, because the idea here is that sometimes I feel spiritual empty, not because Allah has abandoned me, but because I abandoned myself and my true nature and my natural disposition. And these kinds of things are not always purposeful, but society wants us as minorities to be overt in our consumption and to become worshipers of our insecurities, to be in a place where we believe that we cannot heal from our trauma. And all we do with our trauma is take our hurt and hurt other people with it. To have a sense of insecurity so that we seek validation from the systems that were built to make us hate ourselves. The fitra doesn't just have me be inclined towards recognizing beauty outwardly, it also helps me to recognize my own beauty and to be able to love outwardly fully by not hating myself, but having a healthy love of myself. Do you see? So bucket number one of consciousness in our existence is the fitra. Let's turn to the person who's next to us, just so we're solidifying. What is it coming up for you in this discussion of fitra? Let's talk about it a little bit, and then we'll move forward. Go ahead. Hey man,
What was the question again?
what are you just taking from what we're talking about? Why are you guys sitting in the corner back there?
Then we just ate.
What did you eat?
We ate food.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Do you have stitch on your pants? Yeah? And a flower? What's the pink thing? Over here, on the other leg. That's a flower? That's cool. Where's Lilo? You got rid of Lilo? Yeah? Oh, yeah? Oh, man.
That's the main thing.
That makes sense. How are you doing? You're good? Life is good? Okay. You want to go sit with your mom? We're going to start again. Yeah.
Sister Lucia and I had a question.
Just so you know, there's a
Yeah.
live stream on, so they can hear whatever you're saying.
Hi, world.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. So, is there a volunteer we could talk to about? Because we're discussing graduation setup, and we wanted to know or test out the projector. This is also a projector, right?
No.
No? Brother Assad mentioned that he has a projector at the IC.
It's in the back.
Okay.
Cabinet.
So, who do you think we should talk to this evening? Is there anyone we should talk to?
Nobody here, but I can show it to you.
Yeah. What
Okay.
about Minhaf? Would he be a good?
Yeah, you could talk to him.
Connected?
Sure.
Because on
When is the
June
graduation?
7th.
Oh, the ILC party.
Yeah, IS.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I should have pointed
Yeah, yeah.
out. Yeah. So we are going to do a setup on June 5th.
Yeah, you can. Nadia told Manaf and Dahlia,
Oh, Nadia already spoke to Minhaf, you think?
but they didn't tell these details. So we can just add you guys to that WhatsApp group.
Yeah,
you
as
can
long as
coordinate.
because Sister Vajia, I don't think is part of that. So as long as she's on it,
Yeah, we were just waiting to find out details.
I'll let her know you guys are talking about it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank
Okay. Okay. What are we talking about? In terms of the fitrah, what are people kind of hearing? Maybe I can hear back from you what you're hearing so that I know that it's making sense. Yes. Anybody? Yeah, go for it.
I think the point that you mentioned that stood out for us was this idea that the fitrah doesn't change, but our relationship is what can change, and how it can become that voice that if we stop listening to it, it will remain quiet. And so we were talking about moments where we hear that voice and how we need to be intentional in acting on it so that we don't stop hearing it, whether it's noticing we eat excessively, and we were mentioning how there's hope in the fact that we can realize that maybe I shouldn't have eaten this much, maybe I shouldn't have delayed salats or whatever. But after that recognition comes that action so that we can continue to recognize and it doesn't disappear completely.
Great. Other thoughts? This is a part of you. You don't have to believe it for it to be true, but it is a part of you, your fitrah, the primordial orientation of yourself, what you have inclination towards. The nature of the fitrah is not that it gets destroyed completely, but it can become covered, neglected, distorted, suppressed. And what tazkiyah does is that it starts to uncover the fitrah again. It brings you to a place where you're not trying to become somebody new, you're just trying to return back to who it was that you were before. So ego hardens you, dunya distracts you, trauma distorts you, or sin desensitizes us, right? We get to a place where we have the ability through this purification process to start to uncover again. What we want to be able to recognize is the fitra in relation to three other arenas of consciousness that we're going to talk about today. The nafs, the lower self, the qalb, the spiritual heart, and aql, which is our ability to discern right and wrong, not in a prism of moral relativism, but what Allah determines to be wrong. So the fitra, if we were to start to create definition, that's the part of you that pulls you towards Allah. The nafs is going to pull you towards indulgence, like submitting to other than Allah. The qalb is going to, by its inherent nature, be influenced by whichever force is more nourished and fed consistently. And the aql is meant to discern truth and guide the person with wisdom in terms of how it is that it navigates these things. Some things that you want to pay attention to in terms of a fitri state and being naturally inclined through that fitra. The fitra naturally inclines us towards recognizing Allah right off the bat. Does that make sense? So when you live in a world where a lot of the meetings don't start and end in the name of Allah, a lot of the restaurants don't have cooks that are starting to cook in the name of Allah, a lot of the classrooms are not in places where professors teach in the name of Allah, the secularity in and of itself becomes devoid of God in a lot of different ways, and it starts to numb and desensitize. The whole idea is not to just be with Allah when you're here on a Friday afternoon or a Wednesday night or these kinds of things, but the advice that the Prophet gives to Mu'adh radiallahu an, you have taqwa of Allah wherever you are. If you want to know where your fitra is, bucket number one, how does it recognize Allah? Two, how does it recognize sincerity, ikhlas? There's three categories of people that the Quran introduces us to right in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah. The Mu'minoon, may Allah make us from amongst them. It's the first part of the first verse that we've been looking at for more than a month now. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Understanding the Mu'minoon in relation to two other categories of people. The people who are kuffar, kafirun, their hearts are just covered. And then third, the munafiqeen, people who are hypocrites. They outward express one thing, but inwardly, their inner doesn't relate to the outer, right? We'll talk about these three groups in relation to this thing of tazkiyah a little bit more, but understand it here, where sincerity, ikhlas, is the state that is opposite of nifaq, hypocrisy. Do you see? So the ability to recognize sincerity as well as experience yourself with sincerity, but that natural disposition, the fitra in and of itself. Have you ever met someone who just seems like a genuine person? Regardless of what you believe of his politics or not, most people find an attraction to Zohran because he just seems very genuine. He seems very sincere in what he does. Do you see? And then he puts in actions that follow up with his behaviors. لِمَا تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. When Abu Talib tells the Prophet, alayhi salam, from the chieftains of Mecca to stop preaching in the early part of Meccan experience. The Prophet says to his beloved uncle, pointing at the sun, that, "Oh uncle, it'll be more likely for you to go to that and bring light from it down to this world than me stopping this thing. If they were to put the sun in my right hand, the moon in my left hand, I still wouldn't stop." And Abu Talib tells his beloved nephew, "Keep going, I will protect you." What is he attracted to and recognizing in the Prophet in that moment? The Prophet's sincerity, his genuineness. Do you see? The ability from the fitra to recognize like real rahmah, real compassion, to recognize what is actual justice, the creation of balance, and by default and extension, what are the absence of these things? Where is the absence of compassion, the absence of equity, the absence of justice? The fitra plays a role in your heart being unsettled, when you see the gross inequities in the world. If you have a broken heart, at least it means you have a heart. And allowing for yourself to start to think out, why don't I get riled up when bad things happen to people that are different from me? Why does somebody have to only be from certain places for me to feel an inclination towards them? The fitrah recognizes beauty, recognizes truthfulness, and truthfulness is not just about speaking truth, but truthfulness, real sidq, is about not falsifying one's condition in the presence of the divine. Humility, ibadah, worship, like what are you really submissive to, and a moral awareness. The second bucket of what it is that exists as an arena of consciousness for us is the nafs, the lower self, the ego. The nafs, by its nature, it constantly seeks comfort, validation, control, indulgence, and superiority. These are characteristics of the nafs, potentially. The lower self is constantly in a state of a need for validation, a need for comfort. I'm not good with discomfort. I'm not good if everybody doesn't like me the way that I am. You put it into a practical example, the Prophet ﷺ had people who hated him for being who he was. He didn't get up and get thrown into a frenzy. My uncle dislikes me. My best friends that used to hang out with me don't follow me. His submission was not to the validation of people, it was to the creator of people. Control. I always have to know what's happening the way it needs to happen, and it has to be something that I have awareness of. An unfamiliarity of the divine and an unfamiliarity of what tomorrow will bring is going to both create a conflict inwardly. You don't know who God is, and you don't know how to deal with a tomorrow that's not in your control, you're going to be miserable. But I can yield to the reality that I was never supposed to be the one that's in control. The nafs wants you to be in control in its most base sense, has to always be in control, has to be validated, has to be in a place of comfort. The nafs seeks indulgence and it seeks superiority. When you are in a place where modern society feeds the ego, it tells you to center yourself. It is the opposite of a God-centric worldview, egocentricity. It tells you to worship your desires, to curate your image, to protect your ego, and to prioritize comfort over growth. Tazkiyah, we said at its root, right? The etymology of this, ilm al-ishtiqaq, is not just about purification, but it's about purification, growth, increase, and blessing all together. And if I prioritize comfort, it can come at the expense of growth. A lot of us get paralyzed and stuck and we don't move forward because we don't like to feel uncomfortable. Sometimes you have to feel uncomfortable to be able to move. Purification in and of itself is not always an easy process. Healing from pain requires confronting wounds. But you can be in a place where you put Band-Aids on stuff, or you can be in a place where you actually get to the depth of healing. The nafs is telling yourself, preserve an image of you that exists in this moment. And tazkiyah is about the preservation of your ruh, your soul, your heart, your qalb. They're two very different things. The preservation of the outward and the facade, or the preservation of the inner self. There's verses that we can look at that give us a gradation of what the nafs is and how it is that we can start to identify where we are in relation to it. So if we look at this verse from Surah Al-Yusuf, not Al-Yusuf. If you look at Surah Yusuf, which is the 12th chapter of the Quran, it's 53rd verse. I just put it in the WhatsApp group. Can somebody read it? Somebody want to read it? English, Arabic? Yeah.
And I do not seek to free myself from blame, for indeed the soul is ever inclined to evil, except those shown mercy by my Lord. Surely my Lord is all forgiving, most merciful. Oh no, this is not it. Wait, no, it is. Sorry.
Oh no. Oh gosh.
I will do the Arabic part. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما أبري نفسي إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي إن ربي غفور رحيم.
Great. Why do I want you to know this verse? Well, one, everything that we talk about has base to it. It's not just coming out of nowhere or that we're sitting here and conjecturing. It's all got Quranic base to it. So in this verse, Allah is talking about the lowest kind of gradation of the nafs al-amara bisu, the nafs that's just inclined towards evil. May Allah protect us from it. If you look at the next verse that I put in Surah Al-Qiyamah, the 75th chapter of the Quran, its second verse. Can somebody read that? We have the same two people read it also. You guys have the mic near you? Sorry if I have the mic.
And I do swear by the self-reproaching soul.
ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة.
Great. This is like the middle kind of gradation in this three-tiered gradation. The nafs al-lawama is where most of us kind of spend our time. And then this last verse of Surah Al-Fajr that I just put into the chat. Surah Al-Fajr is the 89th chapter of the Quran. It's 27th verse. You guys read that?
Allah will say to the righteous, O tranquil soul.
يا أيها النفس المطمئنة.
Great. So here now are these three states of the nafs, the lower self. I want you to think about how you're constructed physically, okay? There's nothing without meaning in Allah's plan. If you look at your physical structure, your heart and your mind, these are existing in your literal higher self. Your lower self is the place of the stomach and sexual organs. So we talk about the ego, the lower self. We're referring now to something that we don't want to have aspiration towards submitting to or making sovereign. The nafs al-amara bisu is a soul that commands itself to those things that are just bad. May Allah protect us from it. It commands itself towards evil. And where and how we can understand this: unchecked desire, ego-driven impulses, spiritual heedlessness, overt susceptibility to temptation, and in a place where you make justifications for things with a sense that has a skewed understanding of theology. It's not a big deal if I do this. Allah is most merciful. Allah is also most just, man. So when you're in a place, for example, where you have abused somebody, and then you tell them there's something wrong with them because they don't accept your apology, and you say that you're not forgiving me, Allah is compassionate, there's something wrong with you, it's not coming from a good place. Forgiveness is not a responsibility, it's a right. And the transgression that comes, may Allah protect us from hurting people or taking accountability for behaviors that someone else did, we didn't do. You're in a place where this version of the self, it prioritizes appetite over discipline, image over sincerity, and comfort over growth. It's not necessarily that the nafs by itself is evil by its nature, but its connection to the fitra is that when you start to quiet the fitra and you feed the nafs, it's going to be more inclined towards all the things that we said that it's inclined towards. And it can become dangerous when it's left in a place that lacks refinement to it. Does that make sense? The nafs al-lawama, the self-reproaching nafs, is an important place because it still has moral consciousness. It can have guilt after wrongdoing and some type of internal accountability. It has a characteristic of spiritual awakening, and there's this constant struggle that it experiences between ego and righteousness. This is a version of the nafs that still feels something after it did something wrong. It has not become numb to it. You can compare this to the nafs al-amara bisu, where somebody can do something wrong and they just don't feel anything. Do you know? If I took a banana that was gifted to me and then made fun of the person or mocked the gift or said, what kind of person gives a banana to somebody? Do you know? I am learning from myself that I have a self that doesn't feel anything from putting somebody down. I love bananas, by the way. I eat a banana almost every day. I put peanut butter on it. It's great. You know, should eat like Whole Foods. Do you know what I mean? Right? Not Whole Foods, the brand, but eat like Whole Foods. Do you know? Bananas are good for you. Eat that. If you go to Whole Foods, also not a problem, but says no point to what we're talking about. Let's move on. The nafs al-lawama is a self-reproaching nafs because it's in a constant state of inventorying the good that you do, how you can do it better, and the bad that you do, you acknowledge so you can overcome. You cannot do the good that you do better if you don't also understand that good comes from you. It's not a religion that tells us to feign humility or pretend like we don't have actual spiritual gifts or the ability to be a source of light and beauty. Somebody put these chairs down today. If it was you, Jazakallah khair. Somebody left bananas for me. I'm not going to name who it was, but most of you know who it is that brings bananas into this space. Somebody brought me a bottle of water, as they do every time we have a halakha. Somebody brought me an entire tray of Palestinian kanafa. I'm not going to say who it was because I didn't ask them their permission to do that. Why I asked for Palestinian kanafa is my daughter has an international food festival at her school tomorrow. My wife, some of you have met her, saw the people who signed up for different items, and a handful of them wrote like food products they were bringing qualified by Israeli this, Israeli that. So my wife signed up on the form and she wrote, I'm bringing Palestinian kanafa, right? So I had to find out where can I get some Palestinian kanafa, because she then sat with me and she was like, hey, you need to find Palestinian kanafa for us to take to our daughter's food festival. So I was like, okay, let me figure this out, because where we live, they have kanafa, but it's not from Palestine, you know? And so, jazakallah khair. If you have the ability to do these things, you don't have to be in a place where you deny capacity, nor do you have to create agitation. But the idea is, how do I then understand my ability that Allah has given me the gift to be the person that brings the bananas, to be the person that brings water, to be the person that goes out of their way to get this? Do you see? The example that I shared with some of you many months ago when there was snow and ice outside on the street, that all of us passed it, but our brother Dawood, who runs marathons in the intention of raising awareness for Palestine and children from Gaza, was out there shoveling it. And then his goodness brought other people to be there hacking away at the ice so it was easier for people to walk on the sidewalk. The nafs al-lawama sees and recognizes what I have the ability to do in a beneficial way and then thinks, is there ways for me to improve this with gradualism, as well as where is it that I have non-strengths? And we oscillate in different ways, but there is a recognition of wrong, there is a desire towards repentance, and there's a feeling of discomfort after disobedience. A healthy gift from Allah, sorry, I'm like half asleep. Healthy guilt can be a gift from Allah. Does that make sense? And a person who has a nafs that still reproaches itself is indicative that your inner self has now not become numb or kind of just dead in relation to submission to everything that's outward. So the second stage of what the nafs is, an area of consciousness, because the nafs can choose choices. And then the last is called the nafs al-mutma'inna. May Allah bless us with a nafs that's like this, one that's in a state of tranquility. This is a nafs that finds serenity through the remembrance of Allah, not a state of agitation. You know who your God is and where God is with you, not just when things are good, but in states of adversity. You know who your God is to the extent that when you make a mistake, that you can always turn back to that God. You know who your God is in such a way where that relationship builds courage and movement forward. The nafs al-mutma'inna is in a state of inward peace and contentment. Spiritual surrender that isn't just about prostrations of prayer with your body, but you start to prostrate also with your heart. You have a contentment with Allah, meaning that you can still have questions, but you trust in divine decree. You know that your understanding of something is not what gives it legitimacy, but where you don't have understanding and comprehension, you still yield to the idea that Allah knows best. And there's an alignment between the inner and the outward, the heart and the action. So there's a distinction between me thinking about the doing of good and then actually doing the good. Do you see? And it's not that this self is free of hardship, but this is a self that finds itself in a state of peace with Allah despite hardship. So when some of us went to Jordan together, when some of you went to Uganda, and you were thrown in a state of frenzy because you had to confront the reality that people you never met, Palestinian refugees, Sudani refugees, who were happy to see you, they loved you without ever meeting you. Why? They were in a place where they still say Alhamdulillah despite the difficulties. Why? Their inner self can still find balance despite hardship. And they're in a place where contentment is not rooted in an outward comfort alone, predicating where and how they build a relationship with the divine. A part of this is important because when I don't know how to deal with my stress, and if my nafs is in control, it's going to have me name experiences in relation to my nafs being in control. I want to know the nature of how these things work, so then I can determine, is my perspective being defined by my heart, or is it being defined by a tyrannical ego that's in charge of everything? The tranquil self is not enslaved by validation, comparison, dunya, materialistic world, and ego. Dunya, its root, one of its meanings etymologically in like original meanings is about reaching for grapes that are out of reach. Does that make sense? Right? Like, I am 5'2". Do you know? Many of you are not 5'2". How tall are you? 6'3". Great. We stand next to each other. I look like I'm his grandson. Do you know? And if there's a tree that's next to us, remember there used to be a speaker, the speaker behind the screen. We used to put dates on the top of that thing. And I would say to Yassine, grab the dates, because I couldn't reach the dates. If I reached the dates and I couldn't, and you all stood and watched and laughed at me, you have a bad nafs. But dunya, one of its original meanings, reaching for the grapes that are out of your grasp. It has you just chasing after things and not content with what you have. The nafs al-mutma'inna is not enslaved to that. You're not in a place where you evidence the hadith that says if you give the son of Adam a valley of gold, they go and seek out a second valley of gold. You have contentment with what you have. The tranquil self is not enslaved to the ego. Does that make sense? And the stability of it comes from its relationship to Allah. So if we were to understand it, the nafs al-ammara bisu, it is impulsive and desire driven, and its relationship with Allah is resistant. The nafs al-lawama is self-aware and struggling. The ajr is in the struggle, man. Get comfortable with discomfort, and the relationship with Allah is one that is repentant. You return. And the nafs al-mutma'inna, it's in a state of peace and surrender. And the relationship you have with Allah is that you have proximity and nearness. The goal of tazkiyah is not to pretend that the lower self does not exist. What tazkiyah does is about learning when to resist it, when to discipline it, when to heal it, and how to bring it into submission to Allah. Every single mu'min carries all three states within them at different moments. And when you are engaging in it reflectively, the question you want to ask yourself, which version of myself am I feeding most consistently? Does that make sense? These are not things that are abstract, nor are there things that we are meant to say, oh, that makes sense, but to understand it in actuality. What is the state of my nafs in this moment? And what we said before, the fitra and the nafs, the one that the qalb responds to, the spiritual heart, is going to be the one that you feed the most. And you don't have to be consciously aware of what it is that is being fed, but the anti-black world that you live in that serves and submits to whiteness, it is driven on an unhealthy consumption that feeds the ego. That's just what it does. And by default, if you yield to that, then you're feeding the ego. You're making justifications for things that just don't make any sense. Frame number 2 of consciousness is the nafs. Let's do this just for a minute because I've been talking a lot. I don't think we're going to finish this verse today. I'd love to hear from people also, feedback and real feedback. You can just send it to me. You can talk to me about it. I don't know if it's helpful for us to go through this slowly and you want to just kind of go through it fast, or if these are going like too long, but let me know. Don't tell me right now because I don't want you to hurt my feelings in the middle of all this. But tell me at some point if you'd want us to pick up the pace. But let's talk about this discussion on the nafs. What's it bringing up for us, the nature of it. And one of the things that I want you to think about is how do you bridge the relationship between knowing something and acting upon what you know? Because a lot of you have heard about the nafs al-ammara bisu, the nafs al-lawama, the nafs al-mutma'inna, but you don't live as if those are actual things. You know you don't. Why not? You've heard about the fitra, but you don't live as if the fitra is an actual thing. Or you might know the terms, but you're not relating to them with depth. Why do you think that is? How do you start to bring that as a framing and a philosophy that influences decisions and choices? Let's talk about what we're taking away a little bit, and then we'll go through the last 2 buckets a little quicker. Go ahead.
No, Latif, you don't want 3 bananas?
Thanks, How are you, man?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Good, alhamdulillah.
How's your mom doing?
She's doing better. Thank you for asking.
Glad to hear. I'll be right back.
Sure, go for it.
Do you need any more water?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
Are you fasting too?
I'm not fasting too.
I'm gonna bring this.
Sorry. Okay, what are we talking about? If we can hear from one or two people quickly.
So we talked about a couple of points first. Like you asked about knowing like what the right thing to do is, but then sometimes we don't do it. So it could be because of like the whispers of the devil, the shaitan, or also because of our own egos. And the second thing brother discussed was sometimes when, for example, we're scrolling on social media and we don't realize like the time that's passing or things that we should be doing, and then later you reflect that, oh, I spent too much time on my phone. I should have prayed or whatever. So it's like being distracted in the moment, and you don't recognize like you're not cognizant of what you should be doing at that time.
Good. Other thoughts? You see how that relates to the right distraction. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. It's just it makes sense if you just read it and you reflect upon it. You see what I mean? What else did we discuss? Why are you laughing at me? So messed up. You just laugh. Are you crazy? Just spontaneously laughing. Crazy ass. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm wondering that the 3 levels of nafs, once you achieve nafs mutmainah, is that right? But isn't it a practice? Because you can kind of be in between all 3 within 24 hours. Or is there a level where when you achieve this sense of contentment, it just, you don't slip up? Right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about how this all relates to tazkiyah, but you will have oscillation. There will be things that come up. That's why the idea of Islam is not the pursuit of perfection. You're going to make mistakes. You are going to give in at different times, but the whole idea is to recognize capacity and then try your best. Do you see? The nafs is a real thing. And you want to be in a place where this is the idea for us within the prism of tazkiyah. You want to have a nafs that is not in control, but one that submits. And what's it going to submit to? Like your natural disposition, the fitri state, your qalb, the heart. And to not see these as just sentimental conversations or conversations of fluff, but actuality is going to then have to say, like, what's actually existing in my heart? How am I nourishing it? How am I cultivating it? And I can just learn about myself through myself. This is why we talked about core beliefs on Monday, because these things affirm themselves through how we process realities. And we want to be in a place where we start to deconstruct habits that exist at a mental, emotional level and live with a sense of contentment. And inshallah, Allah grants us and makes us people of rida. But you can just know yourself through yourself. Why do I get upset at the things I get upset about? Why do I get agitated? Why am I angry? Why am I in a place where I make excuses for things that are inexcusable? How have things been put within me that now kind of numb in ways that are not helpful? We want to see this in the prism of tazkiyah. The 4th bucket that we want to talk about is the aql. And the aql, loosely translated, you can talk about that as the intellect. Sorry. So the aql in and of itself, one could see as being a function of the heart. And quite often when you find it Quranically, it isn't necessarily seen as its own isolated thing, the way you have iman, the way you have taqwa. But aql in and of itself, cognitively, is a function of the heart. Right? May Allah grant us hearts that are sound and free of anything that creates harm for us or others. And understanding it as intellect, but not just intellect in a vacuum. This is an intellectual capacity that relates to discernment through divine presence. It's not a religion rooted in moral relativism. There's more to it than that. When you have intellect, for us as humanity, that's seen as an actual ni'mah, as a gift. Allah can give you a gift, doesn't mean you use it the way that He wants you to. An intellectual capacity in and of itself still has to have some method of ethics attached to it. Think about what people use their intelligence for these days. A lot of people use their intelligence for things that create harm. They sit and they strategize on how it is that they can create military industrial complexes and prison industrial complexes, how it is that they can continue to hold down and oppress people. A lot of people use their intellect for lahu. They use their intellectual capacity to achieve nothing, right? When we talked about lahu, we said one of the greatest tragedies is to find success in something that really doesn't mean anything. Here, we want to understand that intellect that is devoid of humility, that becomes the seat of arrogance. May Allah protect us from it. And where information in and of itself is something that we have a lot of access to today. You can look up anything on the internet. You can talk to AI machines that can tell you anything about anything. The access to information in and of itself is not the goal. The ability to discern information and distill it with wisdom, hikmah. What is it really pointing me to? How does it become a tool for the deepening of the meaning and purpose? Not just to know something, but through the knowing of something, to be able to enhance comprehension and deepen in understanding. So if you're in a place where you know facts and you know statistics and you know opinions, but you struggle with discernment, restraint, presence, and wisdom, this is a challenge that is not rooted in anything other than the aql. The purpose of the intellect is not so that I win an argument, but it's so that I have the ability to recognize truth and then submit to what is true. It's not supposed to be what makes you win all the time. If you want to always be right, Islam is not the religion that teaches that. It just doesn't. And if you're always the one that's right, there's probably something wrong going on, man. Do you know? Like, how can you always be right, dude? It doesn't make any sense. I was talking to my son the other day, and I don't know what we were talking about, but I called him bro, and then he couldn't stop laughing. And then his sister, my daughter, was like, Baba, why did you call him bro? I was like, you were mean kids, right? Why are you mean to me? The whole idea is a sound recognition that's not self-deprecating. The nafs al-lawama has to recognize good in order to recognize how you can do it better. It has to see that you are an agent of beauty also, not just an agent of ugliness, but the also is important. You are an agent of beauty and ugliness. Ugly things come from you. Ugly things come from me too. It doesn't mean I become indifferent towards it. That's just what makes me human. An intellect that is rooted in the absence of these ethics produces an arrogance that we have metrics of assessment. It's not an intellect that's just about winning arguments. I proved to you that you're wrong. Congratulations. You also killed our relationship in the process. You made me feel as if I'm not worthy of being in your company. Show me where the Prophet ﷺ, who knew more than anybody, made someone feel as if they knew less than him. Where? The intellect wasn't about an elevation of the self that was rooted in the denigration of somebody else. It's about recognizing truth and submitting to it. Every person that's intelligent is not spiritually awake. And you can be a smart person and be emotionally stupid. You can. You can be an extremely smart person and you can be suffocated and trapped by your ego. The aql needs the qalb, the spiritual heart, to be what is sovereign. If I asked you all, the same way I said the other day, if I passed the mic around and I said, tell me the 8 categories of zakat, how many of you can name them? Not as a trivia question or Sunday school knowledge. How will we build for people who are in need if we don't know who Allah taught us to be looking out for? How? The person who is shackled by debt. This is an alleviation that zakah is supposed to be a tool for, right? When was the last time Muslims got together and said, hey man, how are we going to protect our people from predatory lending practices that are built upon shackling them in debt? The person who's stricken by bondage. If you're not thinking about that as a category outlined by the divine, how are we going to build something that, the Knicks are doing really well right now, right? Right? They are. I don't know if you watch basketball, but last night's game was crazy. During the NBA Finals, it becomes one of the times that trafficking and prostitution is at its highest of points in any city. You don't think slavery exists right now? If my intellect is submitted to an ego, then I'm not thinking it's my responsibility to build the institution that protects the world's most vulnerable. Do you get what I mean? You gotta know what the aql is and what it is functionally as an arena of consciousness. And you know that people can be embedded in a place where they have intellect in one frame, but not in another frame. Most CEOs of companies, statistically, are the least emotionally intelligent people in the world. You have to be lacking emotional intelligence to go to bed okay when you wake up and fire 20, 30,000 people and still take a bonus of yourself that's in the tens of millions of dollars. How does somebody do that? Their intellect is skewed. Objective recognition. And then the qalb becomes the spiritual center of all of it. It's called the qalb because etymologically, it's constantly in a place of turning towards Allah, away from Allah, towards Allah, away from Allah, towards light, away from light, towards darkness, away from darkness. You want to know the inherent characteristics, not just from rote memorization, but through reflection, understanding how it becomes applicable. The heart is affected by a few things. What you consume, who and what you love, what you repeat, the things you do again and again and again, what you normalize, and what you also refuse to heal from. It's a hard thing to admit, but healing is a process, but it's still a choice that we make. Some of us misconstrue healing as the constant reopening of wounds to be able to show the world just how deeply hurt we are. You have to love yourself enough to then go through the work of letting yourself heal. And the heart is affected by these things. What you consume, who and what you allow yourself to love. And love can be built in a lot of ways, including what I put myself in the consistent presence of. I can love this bottle of water. I can love this banana. I can love this laptop. I can love it so much that when it's not near me, I don't know what to do. You don't know what to do when you can't find your phone. You don't know what to do. If you touch your pocket right now and you're deeply absorbed in a conversation and then your phone was not near you, a good number of us would be like, I don't know where my phone is. You love it. Your heart's attached to it. When it's not near you, it throws you in a frenzy. The way a mother looks for her child when he's lost in a playground, you look for your phone like that. Your heart is attached to what you put in its presence, what you normalize. Your heart gets affected by it. You can normalize behavior that makes no sense. You know how many people I talk to, man, who say to me as they're talking about their life experiences, when I was little, my parents used to just kind of hit us a bit, the way most parents hit their kids. And then they move on as that's not like a thing that's a problem. It's not okay that parents hit their children. It's just not. And you can normalize the behavior that is abnormal. It is not normal. You can tell yourself through dissonance that something makes sense that does not. Your heart will be affected by it. And what you refuse to heal from. This is what we talked about in terms of core beliefs last week. What are the ropes that are holding you back? You can get to a place inherent to the nature of the heart that the desensitizing spiritually can create a heart that also stops reacting. We're going to talk next week about some of these things in more detail and purification, etc. But the way I want you to think about it is what I'm writing here as how this relates to tazkiyah. I just put it in the WhatsApp group. Tazkiyah, in essence, is the struggle to let the fitra guide, the intellect, the aql discern, the heart soften, and the nafs submit. If you want to know what is a set of points, that's the purpose of tazkiyah. Not that you're just sitting and there's not a value to the exercise, but I could pull out a tasbih and I could do as much dhikr as possible. If I don't know what I'm working towards through the action of purification, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be purifying, but it's a lot different if I know what's the objective yield from this. The fitra guides, the intellect discerns. I'm not making decisions through my stomach or sexual organs. I'm not in a place where I make bad choices because I've muted the aql. I let the heart soften. There's a spiritual paradox in our tradition that a soft heart is a strong heart and a hard heart is a weak heart. You want to let your heart soften. We'll talk next week about what the nature of these things are, but these four arenas are what we want. And you want a lower self, a nafs that submits. The nafs is not supposed to be in charge. The qalb is supposed to be in charge. The world feeds your nafs. It does not feed your qalb. You could say it's amazing. It is a problem that you can walk into a coffee place and they will tailor your order to whatever your specification and write your name on it. It breeds entitlement. If I don't keep myself in check, I don't know what many of you think about me. Think about this as a tangible example, right? Look at my table right now. Alhamdulillah, it's a gift. I got bananas that somebody gave me, man. Somebody bought me some water. I got an iPhone on this table. I got a MacBook on this table. I got a tray of kanafa that I would love to share with you all. But if any of you touch this thing, my wife will be very upset with me. And that's not going to be okay. What do I have to complain about? But the minute that I stop seeing these things as gifts, and I believe that I have them because I deserve them, that I'm somehow entitled to them, the nafs is not submitting. The nafs is in control. You want to understand the innate characteristics. Treat religion as a source of education that then renders through information acquisition the willingness to implement, not just memorize. Who cares that you know where Sirat al-Mustaqim is if you're not trying your best to actually traverse it? And this stuff is going to be important. Tazkiyah is important because that world wants your heart to be filled and attached to things that make you loathe yourself, that make you believe that you made it by gaining validation from the systems that were built to make you be oppressed and suffocated. I was in a meeting today with some people who are helping us to build these things. And one of the women who is helping to build this, she said that I'm not trying to get an invitation to where other people are. I don't need you to invite me to get a seat. I'm building my own tables. May Allah grant her tawfiq in it. It's not a statement of arrogance. I've known her for more than half of my life. She's got a genuineness to it out of love for each of you, that we're trying to build something that inshallah lasts forever on what you know you experience when you find good friends and good community. Tens of thousands of people engage us in this way. May Allah grant us tawfiq at this. You gotta have a courage that doesn't say the success is I keep going back to the places that offer me crumbs. You have to live in a world that is not conducive to our religion's ethos, because the sunnah is both the antidote and the opposite of supremacy. Somebody taught you to pray your sunnah prayers before they taught you whose sunnah you follow, then it's going to be easy for you to think in ways that is not conducive to a heart that embraces a prophetic mode of living and as a philosophy on life. It's going to tell you consumption is the root of value and self-worth. To see yourself in a skewed way. Tazkiyah is the struggle to let the fitra guide, the intellect discern, the heart soften, and the nafs submit. That's why we want to understand it as a process and do it with regularity, so that each one of us can be in a place where the parts of us that are supposed to exist in a mode of hierarchy within us. The nafs is not supposed to be in charge. The qalb is supposed to be in charge. Contentment can be engaged, but you have to be willing to do some of the things and recognize the nature of it. In the coming weeks, we're going to talk about, not coming weeks, but in the next class, we'll talk about the how-tos. We'll talk about this as a broader science, right? Tazkiyah is not something that you want to shy away from. There is not any methodological approach to Islam that does not embrace tazkiyah as an actual science that you can learn and implement in a way. What is it seeking to counter? How does this connect to the verse before? You gotta cultivate and nourish the heart. The way you nourish the body, you nourish the spirit. Ghafla, distraction, is going to kill the heart. Can I ask you what you think about when you're doom scrolling? Like you're thinking about nothing. You get to a place where it has a benefit in that the pervasive, invasive thoughts stop as you're just scrolling. The Quran acknowledges that there's a benefit in drinking alcohol and a detriment, and the detriment outweighs the benefit. Understanding what we said in the nature of the maharim, zina, gambling, intoxicants, all of these things, they have a common thread of being addictive. You can have habituated behavior. Modernity shows us that distraction can also become something that's habituated. You start to reclaim presence and reclaim consciousness. And in order to do that, we want to know what are the arenas that consciousness can exist. Fitra, nafs, aql, qalb. The layers to the heart are four. You have the most outward layer, that's called your sadr. This is why in Surah An-Nas, the last chapter of the Quran, Allah says, الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ, that the whispers, the waswasa of Iblis, they come at the sadr, your literal outer layer. All Iblis can do is knock. You decide if you let him in. This is rooted in access points to where we're vulnerable, where we're insecure. The heart becomes strong if you allow for yourself to heal. Stop pretending that you are not where you are in this moment. Allah sees you and loves you because of who He is, Azza wa Jal. You can make excuses for things that are inexcusable. It's just going to give more and more. الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس. The waswasa of Iblis is a spiritual adversary. The next layer of the heart is what's called the actual qalb, the spiritual heart. Its relation to the physical heart is something that's there. Its tangibility is not necessarily the same, but this thing exists within you. The hadith tells us very clearly, if it is good, everything will be good. If it is not good, everything will not be good. Embedded within it is a third layer that's called the fu'ad. This becomes a seat of emotions. When the mother of Moses is identified through her anxiety in placing her child into the water, the agitation is described as being within her fu'ad. What's the state of yours? And then the last is called the lub. Lub is discernment. And the relation of the lub, the people of al-bab that the Quran speaks about, the people of that clarity, that discerning quality, the likeness of the lub to the rest of the heart is analogous to the likeness of the pupil to the eye, to the Kaaba's relationship to Mecca on a whole. It's the place where the light comes in. Understanding its construction is important so that you can know how it is that you nourish, and understanding that it has capacity the way that the bottle has capacity. You can't fill something that already is full. How can I put the banana into the bottle of water that is already filled with water? I need to either empty out the water, or I have to deal with the fact that part of the exhaustion is that you can't put something in something that's already filled. Spiritual adversaries that we'll deepen an understanding of. Dunya, we talked about briefly, right? Its original meaning, you're reaching for the grapes that are beyond your grasp. Hawa, base desires. The Quran asks us, فَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَى. Do you see the one who takes their desires being their God? The cognate of Hawa is the wind. If you speak Urdu or Hindi or other languages, Hawa means wind also in those languages. The wind is gentle enough that it can bring a cool breeze to you, and it can make the branches of a tree move here and there. The wind is also strong enough to knock down buildings. Your desire has the ability to make you submit to it. And then a fourth that's important to understand is the nafs, spiritual adversary, that is also an arena of consciousness. We get into some of the methods to deal with this. You want to think about it at a practical level. The whole idea is to not think about knowledge as what I have on a bookshelf, but the relationship between knowledge and action, and the implementation of this as exercises, so that we're not in a place where it's just done in a vacuum. I want you to sit with this thought, and before we wrap up, I want you to think about it in discussion with people. What do you think about this idea that if we were to deepen our definition of tazkiyah, tazkiyah is the struggle to let the fitra guide, the intellect discern, the heart soften, and the nafs submit. So as we're wrapping up, let's turn to the persons next to us. What are you taking away from tonight's conversation? What do you think about this statement as an output of tazkiyah? Let's talk about it a bit. We'll make a couple announcements and make dua, and then we'll pray Maghrib. Go ahead. Oh, crazy.
Yeah. I
Thank you for sharing that. This is for everybody? Dates to pass around? No. I just want to make sure I can give them to everyone. I can tell them they can have. Okay. ठीक ठाक सब खैर अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह सही है मैं ले लूँ चल ये सूडान के लिए
जो वाटर प्रोजेक्ट है
ठीक है मैं इसमें डाल दूँगा चल शुक्रिया يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي Okay, what are we talking about? Maybe we can hear from a couple of people before we make some announcements and make some dua. Who has a mic? Oh, you have. Thanks for running the mic around too. You want to say something?
I think the one thing that we were reflecting on is just like how powerful it was for us, learning about the etymology of the word dunya, and how it really does encapsulate like a lot of our living experiences. You spend so much of your time like distraught because you're reaching for things you'll never get. And there's a lot of people who just live their whole lives like that, and they just never realize that it's because, they lost track of the bigger plan and they're just trying to gain those small victories. And like we also had Taha put into like this idea that the fitra also ties into that, and what you were saying earlier about how when you stop listening to the right voices, then all these other voices can start coming in, and then you're following the wrong thing altogether. So it's just so powerful how taking those steps of redirection can change the whole narrative altogether, and somehow where somebody might be distraught reaching for something that they could never get, just by being content, so much more comes your way without having to ever do that step of reaching, and you're already much happier about it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it's not that dunya means reaching for the grapes that are out of your grasp, but the root letters etymologically also then create a derivation that is used in that way. Does that make sense? Do you see the nuance difference there, right? Yeah. Other thoughts? What do we think? What are we taking away from today? What do you think of this idea of this kind of understanding of does give? It's the struggle to let the fitra guide. It's the struggle to let the intellect discern, the heart soften, and the nafs submit. Does that bring up anything for anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
So in our group, we were kind of just like, well, I'm sorry, so they were talking about we started off talking, we didn't start off.
You're doing great, you're doing great, yeah.
Okay, so something that, if any of you guys went to the class over this weekend, something that Omar said, which was something that someone in our group mentioned, was that we were all created for this moment that we're living in right now. And this was in relation to the broader conversation, which was just structurally the world that we live in a society, and how the systems that are built around us place us in a position where we are moving through life from a place of fear. So there was this idea of like what the self, as an individual, what we can do in terms of letting the fit like that and softening the heart and all that other stuff. But then also being able to build systems and structures around us that allow us to not be able to sort of succumb to the fear and anxiety that if I do something in this moment, something is going to happen. And sort of the example that we've been talking about was just like helping people out in the street. If you see someone who just randomly collapses on the street, they probably have an overdose or something, or someone asks you for money, and you've been taught to sort of be tunnel vision, not necessarily even notice the things that are going around you in the city that you're living in. Because one, there's a very real fear that exists there, especially if you're a woman. But two, it's this disconnection from the world around you. And I think the conversation took us in many different places, but ultimately we landed at the place where I began.
It's great, mashallah. Jazakallah khair. Sit with some of these concepts and think about them reflectively. Reflection is not self-deprecation. If we were to ask, like, where is your relationship to your fitri state? Write it at the top of a notebook and then answer the question for yourself. And is it where you think it could potentially be? Think about what is the state of your nafs and where does it have oscillation? Think about the utilization of your intellect, your aql, and how is that present in your decision making, your choices. Think about your heart, your spiritual heart, the qalb, and what is it that is becoming attached to, and where is it kind of healthy, and what are things that are not healthy for it. You see, in the prism of some of what we talked about last week, core beliefs, positive and negative, and as we're kind of deepening in the tazkiyah discussion as well. A couple of things just before we make dua. We are going to next Tuesday have iftar for the day of Arafah, inshallah. 6 o'clock we'll have like a halaqah. We're going to do a communal dua also, and that'll go into Maghrib time. For those who don't know, the day of Arafah is the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. It's a very auspicious day on our calendar. We'll have iftar here at Maghrib time, and you're more than welcome to come. It'd be really great if people can RSVP on our RSVP form just so we can plan accordingly. We've already had more than 400 people RSVP. So you can imagine when we're dealing with a community that's in the thousands, it's not that 50 people will show up and 40 RSVP'd and the delta is something that's easy to account for. But if you have by next week 1,000 people RSVP and 2,000 people show up, it's very different in ordering food and getting volunteers and getting everything going. So please just do that. Even if you regularly come here, we are dealing with a lot of people in this community. And so having an accurate head count would be helpful. Inclusive of for our Eid prayers and brunch, they'll be happening next Wednesday in Washington Square Park, inshallah. Make dua, the weather holds up. And on Friday, we have an Eid dinner planned here. Not this Friday, but next Friday. And you're all more than welcome to come to whatever you can come to, but please do RSVP. We're running 3 charity campaigns in these days of Dhul Hijjah. The Prophet ﷺ highlights the importance of doing good deeds within these days and how beloved they are to Allah. One is to give the udhiyah, the qurbani, the ritual kind of sacrifice that's done within the Abrahamic tradition, the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam being commanded to sacrifice his son Ismail alayhi salam, and in place of Ismail, a ram is kind of presented. We have a campaign to do the udhiyah and qurbani for people in Gaza, as well as in Sudan, and to Sudani refugees that have been displaced outside of Sudan. And then in addition, the organizations we're working with in Gaza have been given permission to build educational facilities in Gaza for orphans. And for Sudani refugees, some of you have visited in Uganda. We're trying to build clean water wells that will provide water to people who just don't have clean water to drink. And that's not a reality you can really understand if you've never seen it firsthand. So please do give what you can. And then the third campaign is for pediatric patients that are hospital, Eid toys for them. It's in 30 hospitals around the country, including here in New York, as well as Heal Palestine is working with the main organization Caregiver to provide Eid gifts to Palestinian children who are hospitalized. And then tomorrow, they're going to add a list for children who attend the masjid in San Diego that had the active shooting edit earlier this week, to help them just realize that people are thinking about them. Some of these toys are like $2, you know, but you just got to get up and make it happen. Whatever you can contribute to any of these and help to share the links would be appreciated, inshallah. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? Okay. If you're fasting, there are boxes of dates that are being passed around right now. And Maghrib just came in for those who are Sunni. So feel free to break your fast if you'd like. Let's close with a dua and then we'll call the adhan and we'll pray Maghrib together, inshallah. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma laka alhamdu kama yanbaghi li wajhika wa adhim sultanik. لك الحمد حمدا طاهرا طيبا مباركا فيه إلى يوم الدين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. We begin this supplication in your name, Ya Allah, and beseech you to send your choicest salutations upon your most beloved, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. We turn to you, Ya Rabbi, affirming that you are the one who created us, the one who knows us more deeply than we know ourselves, the one who sees what we hide even from our own hearts. Ya Rabbi, you say of the mu'mineen, the believers, that they are those who are devoted to purification. Ya Allah, make us from amongst them. Not people who simply speak about purification, but people who struggle sincerely towards it. People who are honest in private moments. People who return to you repeatedly. People who are not satisfied with the performance of faith while their hearts remain distant. Ya Allah, bring us back to our fitrah. Strip away the layers of arrogance, fear, comparison, shame, and distraction that have distanced us from the selves you created us to be. Ya Rabbi, there are parts of us that still remember you deeply, parts of us that still long for sincerity, still long for peace, still long for nearness. Do not let the noise of this dunya drown out the voice of our fitrah. Ya Allah, discipline our nafs that seeks validation over sincerity, our nafs that wants comfort without growth, our nafs that becomes obsessed with image, control, recognition, and praise. Do not allow our egos to use religion itself as a means of self-glorification. Protect us from becoming people who appear righteous outwardly while internally collapsing. Make us aware of the subtle diseases we carry, the envy we justify, the resentment we normalize, the pride we disguise as confidence, the heedlessness we excuse as busyness. Grant us the courage to confront ourselves honestly before we stand before you ultimately. Ya Allah, illuminate our aql. Protect our intellect from arrogance. Protect us from knowledge that hardens the heart instead of softening it. Protect us from becoming people who know much but transform little. Let our knowledge bring us humility, wisdom, mercy, restraint, and deeper submission to you. Ya Muqallib al-Qulub, O turner of hearts, purify our hearts. Our hearts have been overwhelmed by distraction. We carry grief we have not processed. We carry wounds we have hidden. We carry fears we do not speak about. Some of us have become exhausting pretending to be okay. Some of us are spiritually tired. Some of us miss you but do not know how to return. Do not let our hearts become hardened. Do not let us become numb to your remembrance. Allow our hearts to remain soft enough to cry in repentance, feel compassion, recognize truth, and experience intimacy with you. Ya Allah, remove from our hearts arrogance, envy, hatred, insincerity, and attachment to dunya. Replace them with tranquility, sincerity, gratitude, trust, and love for you. Make the Quran a healing for our hearts, a light for our confusion, and a companion in our loneliness. Help us to understand that purification is not perfection, it is returning again and again and again. When we fall, let us return. When we forget, let us remember. When we become distracted, let us realign. When our hearts become heavy, let your remembrance lighten them. Ya Allah, make us amongst those whose souls are purified before they return to you. Make us amongst those who hear that we have a tranquil soul, returning to our Lord, pleased and pleasing. And allow our final moments in this world to be moments in which our hearts are alive with your remembrance, our tongues are moist with your dhikr, and our souls are at peace in your nearness. For a moment now, just turn within yourself and allow for yourself to make whatever dua it is that your heart is not just yearning to make, but in fact your heart is in need of. Some of what it is that we ask for is in fact most damaging to ourselves. Ask of Allah to let you let go of the things that are not good for your inside, to find the company that helps hold you up in making decisions that are difficult, but you know are necessary. Ask of Allah to illuminate what is good in terms of creating awareness and consciousness, to make you bold enough to ask of Him to remove the distractions and to help you to realize who He is, not just in moments that create clarity through connection in times of prosperity, but in times of difficulty, hardship, in times when you have fallen, to realize and recognize that you can always get back up and return back to Him. But for a few moments, just make your own dua, and then we'll come and end our collective prayer and stand for Maghrib together, inshallah. Ya Allah, accept our dua. Ya Allah, accept our dua. Ya Allah, accept our dua. Ya Allah, by the barakah of this gathering, accept our dua. Ya Allah, by the presence of the righteous that are here, accept our dua. Ya Allah, by the sincerity of the most sincere that are here, accept our dua. Ya Allah, help us to make decisions through our hearts and never at their expense. Help us to watch over our hearts so that our hearts may in turn watch over us. Grant us hearts that are in a state of ease and peace, hearts that are attached to things of real goodness and beauty, hearts that find themselves deep in your remembrance, for indeed in your remembrance do hearts find rest. Grant healing to those who are in need of healing, good company to those who are in need of good company, support to those who feel that they are by themselves, and let each one of us always find within our existence a recognition of your presence, the presence of your mercy, the presence of your love, by sending us those who are reminders of that mercy and reminders of that love. Protect us always from hearts that are not humble, tongues that are not wise, and eyes that have forgotten how to cry. Forgive us for our shortcomings and guide and bless us all. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So just as a reminder, we're not going to have this class next week because of Arafah and Eid on Monday. We're going to be prepping for our Eid gatherings here, and Wednesday is Eid, and so we'll have other things going on. But from the week after, we'll resume. We'll just continue on Mondays and Wednesdays until we finish these 11 verses. The next characteristic that we go through takes up 3 of the verses, so we'll get closer to 11 pretty quickly. But if people want to put their chairs against the wall, we'll call the adhan, pray Maghrib inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.